There is, I think, in his works an element of high tragedy, and I am sure that tonight he will be willing to share with us the movements and gestures of his Danse Macabre. I present to you Stephen King.
Thank you. You come to experiences in your own life that are frightening, and you try to make sense of them in what you write. And I can remember living in Colorado, and we had an old American Motors car that just simply vomited up its transmission one day in the middle of the road. And a tow truck came along and took it away to wherever they take transmissionless Matadors. And they called around after it had started to get dark and said, your car's ready if you want to come and get it. My wife said, are you going to take a cab? And I said, no, I'll walk. And I walked, and it got darker and darker, and this was really on the edge of town. You know, there was nothing there, and you could see the dealership, but it was a ways away. And the path went across this bridge, you know, a little arched, humpbacked wooden bridge, and I'm walking across it, and I can hear my heels clacking on the bridge, and I flashed to this story when I was a kid about these goats that were going across a bridge, and there's this troll underneath, and he said, who's that trip-trapping on my bridge? And I thought, wouldn't it be a scream if something just reached up now and grabbed me and pulled me down there, and that was the last anybody heard of old Stevie King. So, but the incident stayed in my mind, and over a period of 5 years, I would come back to that and come back to that, and little by little, I began to evolve the story until now it's developed into a novel. It's about 1,300 pages long. It's called It, and it all came from that one little moment of fear, and I think that a moment of fear is worth having if you can get something good out of it.
This is Tim Reed, Richard, in Virginia. It's back. I found a picture of Georgie.
Its enduring power may come from the chords it strikes among all of us. We're all human beings, and we were all children once.
It's amazing to me, all these years later, how people are still coming up and talking about that it has this lasting effect and impact.
You never think that something you've created will, this will live on forever.
As an actor, I didn't really pay much attention to the impact that I was having. I was just something I was doing as a kid.
This is battery acid, you slime!
I've done shows in Mexico or in Europe where the crew that I've worked with there, they're like, oh my God, you did it.
I think the story itself is kind of timeless. People going through issues and having to come together to overcome them.
We do it. Oh, yeah. We.
You know, it's a coming-of-age story.
It always surprises me when people say, oh my God, I always wanted to be you in it. I always wished I was Bev. And I think, oh, you poor thing, what was your childhood like?
It's talking some pretty serious talk about what it's like for each of us to be a child. The fun and the scary parts.
Most TV movies disappear into oblivion. I think the fact that it is consistently played on cable has opened it to a much wider audience.
It was one of the first terrifying miniseries. People were invested in it. It became an event.
Something's coming.
And because it was made for TV, it allowed a younger audience to view it as well.
Little kids who saw it on television, it's still in their minds as the scariest thing they've ever seen.
That movie scared the beep out of me. Like, I couldn't sleep. I hate clowns. I hate spiders. Like, can you go near a drain?
People tend to gravitate towards things that struck them as a kid. And I think probably a lot of the people who saw it as teenagers or younger, it burned themselves. So as an adult, it becomes a fun memory. Then it takes on this whole other cult level.
It scared the hell out of millions of people.
One of the comments is typically, Tim Curry is the reason why I'm terrified of clowns.
The portrayal of Pennywise probably went from, yeah, we're gonna have some clowns over for little Johnny's birthday party, to probably not.
Well, a character that manifests itself in the shape of your fears is terrifying at any age and any era. And so I think that's why that concept is so indelible.
A lot of people have told me that it poisoned their childhood when they saw it on television. And I would always think you shouldn't have been watching it.
I had written Carrie, and that had put Steve King, Brian De Palma, the actors, and me on the map in a way that I became a go-to for horror adaptations. I got a call one day from my agent in Los Angeles who said he'd been approached by a pair of producers who'd set up a new Stephen King project at ABC as a novel for television, and was I interested in that? The next day, the doorbell rang, Federal Express at the door, and the guy is carrying the most humongous FedEx package I've ever seen. I took this unwieldy, bulky piece from him and was about to close the door, and he said, hang on a minute. And he went back to the elevator and came back with these 2 giant containers containing the typed manuscript of it in its earliest stages. I sat down and read the opening with young, stuttering Bill.
Oh, we have to seal it first with paraffin.
And baby brother Georgie, and what turns out to be a horrible demise at the hands of Pennywise in the sewer. I went, I'll do it. We went in for a first meeting with the network and the executive vice president of movies for television. And she looked at me and she said, so tell me, what is it? And I said, well, it's an interterrestrial beast that has come down eons ago and has the power to screw with kids' minds.
Beep, beep, Richie.
And attack their worst fears. And she looked at me and she nodded and she said, yes, but what is it? So I went, okay, and I answered another answer. And she asked me, I don't know, 5 more times. And I looked over at the producers and went, I'm in hell. I was coming back home to New York. And I'm sitting on the plane, and I see a guy with his back to me reading what is clearly the cover of my script. It's Bob Iger, who was the head of all of the programming at ABC. And he whipped through night 1, went to his briefcase, pulled out night 2, whipped through night 2, stood up, stretched, sort of smiled, and it said to me it had his support. And I think he decided in that reading, yeah, let's do it. The producers had a brainstorm, and they picked up the phone and they made an overture toward George Romero. He loved the book. He was as nuts for it as I was. He saw the possibilities of what it could be. I pitched it to the network as a long novel for television. I said, I think it should be 8 and ideally 10 hours. We exchanged maybe 5 times in the course of the process. I would do what was needed, which was called a Bible in television terms, which was just a really detailed outline. And I'd send it to George. He'd look at the outline, and a week later, I would get a 45-page typed version of mine interspersed with his thoughts, his notes, and his suggestions. There was never a question that he thought it was going to be a gross-out, lots of blood kind of picture. He understood what television offered was the chance for you to go right up to the line, but his radar was out for what would the network allow. I think the dream of what we had in mind was absolutely amazing. I think we were just about 20 years early in having it. We would have been Game of Thrones. That would have been the way to do this piece of material in its fullest possible way. The network started to get very nervous. Nobody had ever gone where this piece had gone, and they sort of went from it being 8 hours, which became the official running time Bible, to maybe it should be 4, at which point George said, goodbye.
We were looking for a director. We had an air date.
Stephen King's It, starting tomorrow.
Tommy Lee Wallace came to mind. Tommy was also a writer. Part 2 needed the help, and I felt that a director, a writer, would probably be the person to do that.
And action!
I cut my teeth on synopsizing manuscripts for agents and developed a knack for condensing novels into a couple of pages of synopsis. So I just made an attempt to do that with the book. Larry Cohen wrote this wonderful script, and I'm referring to night number 1 because that's what got me truly excited.
The trick in it was in putting on the king hat and going, okay, I've now read this 400 times. I breathe it with every pore of my body, and I'm going to pretend I'm Stephen King for as long as it takes for me to get this done. I did 3x5 cards on the wall, and I went, okay, we're missing how you get from here to here. It's not in what he wrote. I retained a part of Steve's back and forth juggling.
I brought this old photo album from home.
Of the two time periods. I thought it had a lot of emotional resonance.
That's the only time I've ever seen the absurdity of a 7-act TV movie structure actually work because of the 7 characters involved.
So for the first night, the structural job became really clear, and weirdly, the limitation became a tremendous asset.
Each act focused on one of the characters and told the story of what happened in childhood and the alarm being sounded for them.
Hello?
Beverly, it's Mike Hanlon.
I was less enamored with the second night because it deviated so far away from the novel itself. I didn't know that in the beginning because I hadn't read the novel, but I knew something was amiss. It just didn't deliver the goods. The husband of Bevy
No, I'm not married.
re-entered the picture and became kind of the villain of the piece, being more or less animated by Pennywise. In dramatic terms, it did what it needed to do to bring the movie to an end, but it had little to do with the book, and I felt like it kind of gypped the viewer. It was a much more prosaic TV-style climax. I was candid with Larry about that, and by this point, the impetus is moving to Vancouver, and Larry couldn't come to Vancouver to work with me to bring the second night up to the first.
By this time, I'd been working on the project for about 2.5, 3 years. Not quite as long as it took Steve to write it, but the runner-up prize. We were about to start Carrie with the Royal Shakespeare Company over in England, and I was owing a draft on something else. And I went, I think this is my cue to say, go with God, I'm done.
So the job fell to the best guy I could find for free, me, and so I did the rewrite myself. And in this case, we simply were up against a production schedule that was hurtling toward us and was not going to be pushed back. So I just went back to the book again and again until I could find a way to bring the adult story around to something resembling the book. It really is a deep challenge to condense a novel that rich, that deep, that dense into just a few hours of television. I used Mike as a narrative device.
I'm sure by now you all remember what was going on in Derry 30 years ago. There was a rash of killings, maimings, disappearances.
Because you can save a lot of frames of film if somebody's summing up the story.
Henry Bowers confessed to everything and the killing stopped.
I thought it was poignant for him and helped his character, actually. But it was going so fast that at night in the hotel, I would just fast as I could go. I don't think Night 2 is the masterpiece that Night 1 is, because I do respect Larry Cohen's script and didn't feel all that great about changing it so drastically.
Tommy Lee did what he needed to do, given what the circumstances were.
This reminds you very much of your childhood, this neighborhood?
Yes, it does. It does. Same dirt road, same old Grange Hall at the end of the road.
That's you.
That's me when I sold my first story. I'm looking a little bit surprised about the whole thing.
Stephen King is such great drama and mystery, and for as much as his books are about horrific things, they are mostly about deeply human psychological thought processes, so you get a lot of deep character study.
Well, I'd read most of the books because he's a master of narrative, and he tells a whacking good story.
People would say you ought to write about what you know. I grew up in a small town We had no running water. I went to a one-room school with all the grades together, and somebody had to go up to a house and bring back water. And to me, the whole existence was not pastoral or beautiful or anything. It was just boring. I wanted to be in outer space. I wanted to fight monsters in the swamps of the Amazon. So those were the things that I wrote about. And later, I found a way to blend those two interests. My interest in what was strange and alien and the places where I lived and where I grew up.
Most of his works are difficult to turn into films because if you try to visually show an audience what this incredibly talented writer that uses the English language in order to have the reader conjure up their worst fears, it doesn't always work.
The movie has to capture some of the spirit of the writer's heart and mind. And if it doesn't, generally speaking, what the reader went to the book and found and loved, the movie audience won't.
It's hard to capture all the little nuances that he puts in his books.
His stuff was such an influence on so many filmmakers as well as far as storytelling.
Steve's got a very particular genius in creating villains. They become iconic and come into a level of the public's consciousness and the viewer's conscious that's forever.
You were one of the first people to have the idea that a clown could be a scary figure. Did you find clowns scary when you were a kid?
Well, you know, as a kid going to the circus, there would be like 12 full-grown people that would all pile out of a little tiny car. Their faces were dead white. Their mouths were red as though they were full of blood. They're all screaming. Their eyes are huge. What's not to like, you know?
The circus is still the greatest show on earth. And to have a circus, you have to have clowns.
There's a long tradition of clowns. When I was a kid and used to go to pantomimes in England, they used to have a guy whose name I think was Charlie Cairoli, who wore the classic kind of pointed hat and was rather a gentleman. He wasn't threatening at all.
Growing up, my brother was into clowns and ran away and joined the circus. If you've ever been backstage at a circus, it changes your perceptions of clowns.
Often, there's a sort of mayhem involved with being a clown.
They're usually both silly and scary or playful, which can all be frightening to a kid.
I went to the circus in 1974 when I was a little kid. And I have a photo of me where the clown's putting his arm around me and I'm only about this tall. And I have this paralyzed look like, you know, I'm not happy.
I think it's almost archetypal in the sense that clowns, like Pagliacci, the opera, there's always something behind that smile.
I think prima facie, clowns are fucking scary. Even when you're enjoying them, there's something in there in the grotesquerie of it all. And it's really in the eyes, I think. You know, you can have this very funny thing, even if the mouth isn't overtly scary, which sometimes clown mouths are. But the minute the eyes get hard, the minute the eyes aren't, you know, aren't that, they go,
Go to McDonald's when I was a little kid. I would not go hang out with the Ronald McDonald cutout.
The Fry Guys!
Just something weird about it. I didn't think he was gonna grow teeth and eat my face.
Like, not every single clown you see makes you want to instantly turn around and run away in horror.
I think adults and kids understand clowns very differently.
I can't go to circuses. I can't go somewhere where there's clowns, even a picture of it.
What's going to happen if you look at it?
It is a phobia, and it is called colorophobia. The majority of people that are afraid of clowns are adults.
I think for kids, clowns are great fun. There's just not any menace or danger at all. And Steve's particular spin was to take something that's much loved and familiar and ratcheted it up as far as it could possibly go.
Somebody who's got problems and fears and phobias, they go to a psychiatrist and it costs them maybe $150 an hour, and they don't even get a full hour, they get 50 minutes. I do it, people pay me.
There's lots of things that feed into what
King was doing with creating a clown as the main antagonist. At the time, John Wayne Gacy had just happened. So we're dealing with people being afraid of clowns, the guy next door that's a threat.
At one point, I saw a painting of Pennywise that Gacy had done.
A dark landscape, a portrait of Elvis, and a scene with 7 dwarfs.
Tus
But
trailers.
this is the work of
Visita
John
mi
Wayne
canal.
Gacy, an evil man who buried more than 25 of his victims in the crawl space of his own house. Arts Factory owner showed us 5 pieces, including this Pennywise the Clown from Stephen King's It.
I was like, should I be flattered or offended? I don't know how I feel about this.
The scary clown is that realization deep within the child that they can't express that, no, something's not quite right in the world, you know? Like, I've seen the homeless guy in the street.
Any spare change, mister?
Or, you know, I've seen really sick people, or I myself have experienced some kind of abuse or discrimination, right? But you're not supposed to talk about it as a child. You feel like you have to smile and be happy. That's what the evil clown is about. It's about the fact that there's something rotten at the heart of society.
This whole town is it in some way, all of them.
And as a kid, you're not allowed to express it.
Pennywise is really important because the 50s were considered safe and sweet and nostalgic and fun. And at the heart of it, they're not. So the clown works on that metaphorical level that it's saying, this is what the decade was like. On the outside, it's one thing. Inside, it's something completely different.
The mythology of clowns being scary has exponentially grown over the last 20 years.
Fuck you!
I do feel as though this book and this movie had some influence on that.
I was about 5 or 6, and I was in a video rental store, and then all of a sudden, there's this face just staring back at me. And I just froze. Like, if you see a spider, you freeze with fear. I just froze.
People, I think, perceptions change because that's what they're being sold. They're being sold that clowns are scary.
Sightings of a mysterious clown have been creeping out some people in Staten Island.
Media sites have been abuzz with stories of a mysterious and creepy clown.
And, you know, I'm sure that Pennywise and John Wayne Gacy didn't do the best job in creating a positive image of clowns. And I'm sure it wasn't Tim Curry's goal to have people hate clowns for the rest of their lives. But I think it is kind of a hallmark of a good performance.
He had a tremendous impact on growing people's fears about clowns.
I can't say that I ever saw clowns as being threatening, although I loved being threatening.
That's it. Let go. Be afraid.
It was a lot of fun.
There's enough room in our understanding of clowns to have some of them be not so scary, to be sweet and nice, and to be some of them just downright awesome.
Find the light. All right, here we go. Yeah, thank you, and clear, please. And action!
I believe casting has been as much a contributing factor to the success of my version of it as any other factor at all. It was beautifully cast, period.
They brought me the script, and they said, you want to do it? And I'm like, well, yeah. This is an amazing piece. We knew what we had when we were working on it. Pennywise was such a brilliant character.
We were looking for television leads to promote the picture in our marketing campaign. Victoria turned her list in, and we began going after the network-approved actors. We had approval of Harvey Fierstein to star as Pennywise. And we were saying, we need to continue to look on the list here. We don't know whether the network will approve him.
I think they'd mentioned there's going to be either Roddy McDowall or Malcolm McDowell.
And they explored Alice Cooper at one juncture.
So who else have we got?
I do remember that we had brought up Rocky Horror Show and said, look at that.
I had to buy the Rocky Horror Picture Show album. I had to buy the books. I had to buy the scripts. You're a very expensive date.
I know. Just the freedom of the character, the intensity that he gave to it was so wonderful, and you could see that this would translate brilliantly into a horror character.
How about that? We were focused on Tim Curry.
I think he's one of the best actors that's ever come out of England, and I don't think he gets his due.
Was there any time in your life when you said, I want to be an actor?
Yes, I did, actually.
What is there in it which appeals to you most?
Sort of voluntary schizophrenia, really. It's a high-risk profession, and I enjoy risks.
He's created so many iconic characters that we've known through time, and they've been so uniquely different.
You said that being British in Hollywood means that you're usually stuck playing a butler or a villain, but that's okay with you.
I think that they probably feel that we bring some kind of style to the job that we might not necessarily have acquired in the States.
Yeah, but you know what I think it is about you? I think it's that you're very seductive. And, you know, I thought if you were the devil, I would pay to go to hell.
Y tus trailers. Visita mi canal. From any other devil I've ever seen. Looking at his body of work, I feel like there's nothing that he can't do.
And the challenge was, is he available? Is he interested? Can we make a deal?
I'll kill you all.
Will the network be okay with it?
You priceless.
Of course, everyone was.
I didn't audition or even do a meeting. They just asked me if I wanted to do it, and I said, yes, I did.
Tim Curry just had all those elements that he would be fearless in the role.
Kiss me, fat boy.
He brought more to the character than was written on the page.
So he was approved at the network, and the rest is history.
You all taste so much better when you're afraid. Really afraid.
Tim brings his considerable intellect when he does a part.
How does stage differ from film?
I sometimes ask myself that question after I've done a take. Well, one of the great advantages is that you can whisper. I mean, that you can do things that are very small, which you couldn't do on a stage, and I'm just sort of discovering about that.
We didn't talk at great length intellectually about it because it was clear to me that he had the correct instincts.
It's got to be true, whatever you're doing, and the camera picks that up much more cruelly than anything else.
Tim Curry managed to capture the humor that a clown can bring, and then just managed to switch it and be this magnificent evil villain that would kill you and eat you like that.
I'll kill you all.
In a funny way, it's a very simple performance.
Get your pick, Billy boy.
Whenever you see fearlessness in a colleague, it's always an inspiration.
Some wise person in the movie business said, for directors, the key is 90% of it is casting the right actor and then getting out of their way. Tim was a director's dream.
A little farther, Tim. Find the light. Somewhere in there. Not much there. Okay. There. There's some.
I liked Tommy Lee a lot. He was very direct, which was nice.
Tommy Lee Wallace was a brilliantly minimalist director.
Remember in prep, I talked about a frame, and I hope we still have it standing by.
He basically trusts his casting and just gives the actors their head and lets them do what they do well.
He was very clear about what he wanted.
Now, his hand comes up first and then pulls himself up. There, that's it.
Which was great. I really liked that.
Your chin's a little low. That's perfect.
Because then it becomes a pleasure to deliver.
I'll drive you crazy and I'll kill you all.
I'm every nightmare you've ever had. Every worst dream come true. I'm everything you were ever afraid of.
He did give me a lot of room.
Pennywise was a very dangerous invention. And I use dangerous in the best sense of the word. What I mean by it is that they're pitched at a level that tonally can go very wrong very quickly with the wrong casting, with the wrong direction, with any number of fill-in-the-blank mistake possibilities. Tim was the genius choice that radiated perfection everywhere, every time he appeared.
Don't have to do this. My dad says you have to know when to take a stand.
Let's get out of here! Yeah, let's go! We live in dangerous times, boys and girls.
I want you to be careful.
Not just any cards. Bicycle.
He always made the best noise.
Come on, Lorianne, to the store.
No one even thought of going to Vancouver in those days.